if you just stop for a second and think about it, you've probably already seen some kind of news today,
Oh, for sure.
maybe without even trying, you know? A notification on your phone, maybe a TV screen at the gym, or just scrolling through social media.
It's just sort of the background noise of life now.
It is. And being able to talk about what's happening, about current events, is one of the most practical ways to really expand your knowledge.
It really is. We're surrounded by information, but the goal isn't just to, absorb it all passively. If you want to go beyond just reading headlines and actually feel comfortable engaging with it.
Right, like discussing a tricky subject.
Exactly. Or even just understanding a complicated story. You need a specific set of tools for that.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We've gone through a lot sources that focus not just on definitions, but on the practical side of things.
The how-to.
Exactly. Our goal is to give you the vocabulary, some really practical tools for communication, and maybe most importantly, strategies for navigating all this news without feeling, completely stressed out.
We're really framing this as skill building. We're moving past the what's and diving right into the how.
Yeah.
Like, how do you find reliable information? How do you spot bias?
And how do you have a respectful conversation when you just don't agree?
That's the architecture we're building for you today.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start with a common language.
Yeah.
I mean, most of us know what news is. It's information about recent events.
Right.
But it's worth looking at the framework.
For sure. Because the scope is just massive. News can be anything from, a new traffic plan in your town.
Super local.
All the way up to huge international events or technological breakthroughs. It's all recent events.
So within that, the first piece of vocabulary that always jumps out, the one that creates that feeling of urgency, is breaking news. We hear that phrase all the time now, way more than we used to. What does it actually mean today?
Well, it used to mean something really specific, like scheduled programming would literally stop because something important and urgent had just happened.
An interruption.
A real interruption. Now, because of the 24/7 news cycle, the term is used more to signal urgency than, say, novelty. It's something that just happened and is considered essential right now.
Which means speed is the top priority.
Yeah.
And tied directly to that speed is the headline.
Of course.
Everyone knows it's the title, but what the sources emphasize is that a headline is not just descriptive. It's an emotional tool.
Absolutely. The headline is the short title, yeah, but its design is, well, it's aggressive.
Aggressive how?
It's built specifically to catch your attention, to make you click or read or watch. A good headline, from their perspective, is optimized to go viral. And it often does that by highlighting the most dramatic part of the story.
Which can sometimes, I imagine, distort the full picture.
It can. Which brings us to maybe the most critical concept to get right: the source.
So just where the information is coming from.
Yeah.
A TV channel, a newspaper, a website.
A mobile app, even a specific person. And identifying the source is foundational because it's tied to quality control.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the information we gathered was clear on this. If you're serious about understanding a story, you should never, ever rely on just one source.
You need multiple angles.
You need those multiple angles. You need independent confirmation to really build a full picture. Relying on one source leaves you vulnerable to that source's perspective.
And that takes us right into the next big topic. Source quality and bias. Because news isn't perfectly neutral.
That's the unavoidable truth. Bias is just that natural tendency to favor one viewpoint. And when it shows up in the news, it means one opinion is being shown much more strongly than another.
And it's not always obvious.
Not at all. What's fascinating is that bias isn't just about what they say. It's often about what they don't say.
Okay, so let's break down the mechanics here, because the sources pointed out a few key types. You're talking about things like selection bias and spin, right?
Precisely. Selection bias is when a news organization chooses to cover certain facts or certain stories while completely ignoring others that might challenge their view.
So if you only hear one side of an argument...
You've probably run into selection bias. Yep.
And then there's spin,
Yeah.
which sounds more like how the story is told.
That's it, exactly. Spin is all about the language they use, how they frame an issue to make it seem positive or negative.
Loaded words.
Loaded words, emotional adjectives. You could see the same event described as a brave government initiative by one outlet.
And a reckless spending spree by another.
Right. Same event, totally different frame. That's spin.
We also have to talk about placement bias. This one feels a little more subtle.
It is subtle, but it's powerful. Placement is about hierarchy. If an organization wants to downplay a story that doesn't fit their narrative, They might bury it on page 17 or at the very end of the broadcast.
And if they want to emphasize it, it's front and center.
Front page, lead story. Where the story sits tells you how important the editor thinks it is.
Okay, so knowing these types of bias is the first step. But what do we, as news consumers, actually do about it?
The best defense is to diversify your sources. We touched on this earlier, but it's so important. If you consciously read or watch news from different places,
Especially places that lean in different directions.
yes, you're basically forcing yourself to get a more complete spectrum of the facts. It lets you find the truth somewhere in the middle. You become your own editor, in a way.
Now, we can't talk about news consumption without talking about social media. It's the fastest source. It's incredibly popular.
And that speed is exactly what makes it so dangerous. Social media is fast, yes, but, and we have to stress this, it is absolutely not always accurate.
It doesn't have those same verification processes.
Not at all. And that's where we run headfirst into misinformation.
Misinformation. So false or inaccurate information that just spreads like wildfire. The sources we looked at said that because of algorithms, misinformation can actually travel faster than the verified truth.
It can, because those algorithms are built for engagement, not accuracy. They feed you things that get a strong emotional reaction out of you, true or not.
Because that emotion makes you stop and share.
It makes you click. It makes you engage.
And so here's the interesting part. The solution to all this misinformation is verification. Actively checking if something is true before you believe it, and definitely before you share it. But how do you do that efficiently?
The practical tip from our sources is surprisingly simple. It just takes a little discipline. When you see a dramatic or surprising story, just pause.
Don't share it right away.
Don't. Instead, open a new tab and read about the same story from 2 or 3 reliable sources.
Okay, but I have to challenge that a bit. Reliable sources. In today's world, doesn't that just depend on who you ask? My reliable source might be your fake news.
That is a really important question, and the sources help clarify this. When we say reliable in this context, we don't mean political alignment. We mean institutional integrity.
What does that mean?
It means news organizations that have a public track record of journalistic standards. They have clear fact-checking processes. They issue corrections when they get things wrong. They have known editorial standards.
So it's about the process, not the opinion. If 3 separate organizations with these standards, even if they have different political slants, are all reporting the same core facts.
Then the likelihood of those facts being true is extremely high.
Exactly.
If only one, brand new website has the story and it's perfectly designed to make you angry,
That's a red flag.
that is a huge red flag. Verification is basically just triangulating facts across trustworthy institutions.
That's a great toolkit for actually consuming the news. But the next step is harder. Communication. You've done the work, you've got the facts, and now you have to talk about it with someone who sees it completely differently.
And this is where the skill really comes in. People are going to have different opinions, especially of controversial topics.
Politics, the environment, social issues.
All the big ones. The friction starts when one person presents their opinion as undisputed fact.
So strategy is key. Our sources really pushed for focusing not on what you say, but how you say it. To be polite, you have to use soft language.
And what's so interesting about soft language is how it changes the whole frame of the conversation. Instead of stating your view as some aggressive truth, you're just introducing it as information you found.
It just lowers the temperature immediately.
It really does.
So instead of saying, the government's new policy is terrible, you could use one of those starter phrases, something like, I read an article about the new policy and I thought...
It raised some interesting questions. Or, I heard some news about the environmental policy and the main point seemed to be. These phrases are so useful because you're framing it as knowledge you gained, not a truth you're forcing on them.
It invites discussion, not conflict.
Exactly.
Okay, that sets the stage. But what if you hear something you really disagree with? The natural reaction is often to just shut down or get angry.
Which is why we need specific phrases for disagreeing respectfully. You have to avoid things like, you're completely wrong, or that's fake news.
It just puts them on the defensive.
Instantly. And the conversation is over.
So what did the sources recommend instead for that kind of constructive pushback?
They suggested statements that focus on your own perspective without attacking theirs. You could try, I see it differently, or, from what I understand, the facts suggest.
You would like that one.
Yeah. Or you could say something like, that's one perspective, but I read an opposing view that focused on the economic impact.
That shifts the focus back to the information, which is much less personal. So what about the reverse? What if someone disagrees with you? It's so easy to get defensive.
Even if you completely disagree with their counterpoint, you have to signal that you're still listening. You show respect just by acknowledging their input.
So responding with phrases like, that's an interesting point.
Or, I hadn't thought about it that way.
And even if you don't agree, using those phrases forces you to process what they said and shows you value the conversation itself. It keeps the door open.
And practice is crucial here. The more you use this kind of language, the more comfortable you'll be. Your quest to be informed doesn't have to turn into, social conflict.
Okay, so we've covered definitions, checking for accuracy, and talking about it politely. Now we have to shift to a really crucial topic: the stress that comes with all of this.
This was a major finding. For so many people, the sheer volume and negativity creates this psychological burden. That feeling of anxiety from too much overwhelming news is what we call news overload.
And when that goes on for too long, you get what people are calling news fatigue. You're just worn down, exhausted by the constant stream of bad news.
It often leads to what researchers call doom scrolling.
That habit of just endlessly consuming negative news, right? You feel like you have to keep reading even though it's making you feel worse.
And our brains are kind of wired for it. We have a negativity bias. We're built to pay attention to threats. And in today's news environment, that wiring just works against our well-being.
So if being informed is making us miserable, what are the practical strategies to fight this?
The single most important takeaway for your mental health is this: it is absolutely okay to take a break.
You have permission to step away.
You have permission to step away, to reset, to protect your mental space.
And what about when you're not on a break? How do you consume news responsibly?
You can actively manage your limits. Set specific, short times for news, maybe 15 minutes in the morning, 15 in the evening, and then stop. You control the schedule, not the feed.
I also thought the idea of seeking out solution journalism was really helpful.
Yes, solution journalism shifts the focus. It doesn't just report on the problem, it reports on the response to the problem.
So instead of just reading about a crisis,
You seek out stories about communities that are successfully implementing solutions. It keeps you informed, but it balances the negative with something constructive. It's much less emotionally draining.
that brings us to the end of our deep dive. We've defined the terms, learned how to counter bias by checking reliable sources, and adopted language for polite conversation. And crucially, we've talked about protecting our mental health. So what does this all mean for you going forward?
It means it's time to put it into practice. So here's a final practical tip from the source material. This week, choose one big news story. Could be local, could be international. Read about it in English.
And
Then try to explain the main points to someone using those simple, non-assertive phrases we discussed.
start with, I read a news story about, or
Mhm.
the main point of the news was, and just focus on summarizing the facts, not arguing an opinion.
Exactly. Don't worry about mistakes. The goal is just confident, polite communication.
That's the foundation.
It is. So if critical thinking and polite communication are your goals, think about this. What conversations are you now prepared to have that you might have avoided before? With a colleague, a family member? What new areas of knowledge can this confidence unlock for you? Keep practicing, stay curious, and happy learning.